will be sending this video over to Spectrum. But we're back up, ready to go. Nope. Now we're back up and ready to go. Monitors are back up and we're back on. So, as we said from Barack Obama, I'm proud to endorse my friend Joe Biden for President of the United States. Let's go. So, we'll go on from there and we'll look at the article that goes along with this. The secret weapon hidden in Obama's endorsement of Biden, from Joe Lockhart over at CNN Opinion. Sometimes in politics, the least surprising development can be the most important. This is a true thing that has often been lost amid the reality show style administration of our current president. Of our current president, you say? No word on the last one. Huh, I have no chat over here. I have it over on the monitor, but I don't have it over here. While it was expected, Barack Obama's endorsement of Tuesday of Joe Biden is still critically important to the Democrats' chances of winning back the White House. Let's start with the raw politics. Former President Obama's nod reinforces Biden's existing strengths among Democrats, the Democratic constituencies he needs to win the election, particularly black Americans. More importantly, Obama's help on the campaign trail will motivate young people, many of whom have only recent memories of the two presidents in their lives. The contrast between the two, Donald Trump and Barack Obama, is stark, not just on policy, but on larger themes like goodness, virtue, and purpose. Restoring those things to the White House would banish what Obama called his endorsement video the corruption, carelessness, self-dealing, disinformation, ignorance, and just plain meanness of the Trump tenure. The praise for Biden from Bernie Sanders a day earlier was an additional overt clarion call to America's youth that this is their time to have their young voices heard at the ballot box. It's your time to have your young voices heard by voting for a 77-year-old man with Alzheimer's disease. It was also practical and a real help to Biden, framing his message as something that is progressive, that is bold, that does call for structural change where needed. That is a critical narrative for Sanders and Warren voters to accept if Democrats are to succeed in turning them out in the fall. It was more subtle perhaps, but the Obama endorsement also reminded Americans what it's like to have an empathic president. Wow! My bullshit meter just pegged. Who cares more about the American people than himself. His words of support for grieving and struggling families in this public health crisis were a salve for our many national wounds and stand in stark contrast for the selfish rants of the current president. Oh, the orange man is so bad. The former president, as the party's senior statesman, can stay above the daily fray and remind people what it's like to have someone decent, someone of high character, someone who has suffered the grief and struggles Americans are now feeling, and someone who will always put the American people's interest ahead of his own. But perhaps most important to Joe Biden, Barack Obama can make the case for a Biden presidency better than the former vice president can for himself. It's no secret, Joe Biden is not the best communicator that ever hit the campaign trail. He's an old school politician who excels at doing rather than telling. He also excels at not knowing where he is. I'm telling you that right now. Obama is able to make the case not only for electing his good friend, but for why government matters, why good government is important, and why expertise and experience, devotion to both science and the rule of law, trumps the hunches of a former real estate developer, particularly in times of national crisis. Okay, can't read this shit anymore. So, Obama has endorsed Biden, and CNN is drooling all over itself. We've got one more from 538 here before we move on to a negative view of Biden over here. From Jeffrey Skelly and Jasmine Mithani. What happens if a presidential nominee can no longer run for office? President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden are well on their way to facing off in November, but this hasn't stopped the new coronavirus from casting a pall of uncertainty over the campaign. Numerous primaries have been postponed, and the Democrats have already delayed their convention. In fact, there's a decent chance that neither party will be able to hold one in person, possibly necessitating the first virtual convention in U.S. history. There's also a real question mark around the general election, as it may fall in the midst of a resurgence in the virus. But if we're going to entertain doomsday scenarios, let's consider one that's always lurking but may be disturbingly relevant in 2020. The death or incapacitation of the presidential nominee. How would the parties and the public respond to such a tragic event? We know that this is macabre, but Trump and Biden are both in their 70s. Trump turned 74 in June, and Biden is 77, making them the oldest major party nominees in American history. And on top of the reality that the elderly simply have a greater chance of dying, COVID-19 is particularly dangerous for those 65 and older. So if there were ever an election cycle to worry about this morbid hypothetical, it's this one. If something were to happen, the presumptive nominee before the convention, the parties have a plan. They'd proceed as normal and use the convention to pick the nominee. And if something happened after the convention but before the election, there's a plan for that too. National party committees would step in after the election, though things get murkier. It's uncertain how the results would work out in the Electoral College. Let's tackle this first scenario. Something happens to either Biden or Trump before their respective conventions. In the case of the Democratic nomination, they would all of a sudden open up the race, according to Laura Brown, director of the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University. The delayed primaries would become far more relevant, and this could create a free-for-all with Senator Bernie Sanders and other candidates. Let's face it, none of the candidates have officially withdrawn, said Brown. They've just suspended their campaigns. Well, when you've got a 77-year-old man with Alzheimer's sitting in the office, getting ready to take the nomination, I wouldn't withdraw either. But if tragedy didn't strike until the convention, Biden delegates would have to choose someone else to support. Richard Pildes, a constitutional law professor at the New York University School of Law, stressed, however, that even under normal circumstances, the Democratic delegates are technically free on the first ballot to vote their conscience. As for the GOP convention rules, Pildes told me they specifically bind the delegates, and as Trump is the only candidate who will really have delegates, the party might need to issue an interpretation of the rules, or even vote to change them to deal with this unforeseen situation. Brown and Pildes said it wouldn't necessarily prevent a drawn-out convention battle, but if Biden had picked a running mate, that might go a long way in limiting the intra-party fighting because Democrats would already have someone to rally around rather than being split among a host of alternatives. On the other hand, Vice President Pence would automatically ascend to the presidency should something happen to Trump, giving Republicans a pretty straightforward pick if a disaster struck before their August convention. If something happened after the conventions but before the election, the national party committees would pick another nominee. Under Republican rules, the RNC could reconvene the national convention, although Pildes told me it's hard to imagine that being feasible, so in both parties, national committee members would vote to elect a new nominee. Pence would once again be the obvious choice for Republicans, although the GOP would also have to pick a new vice presidential nominee, as would the Democrats if the situation arose for them. And while Democrats could try to back a former candidate or an outsider who didn't run, say Cuomo, Brown said a crisis like this would likely push the Democratic National Committee to put the vice presidential nominee at the top of the ticket. I assume that the Democrats would attempt to follow the same pattern as the GOP. So that's interesting to think about. What could possibly happen if all of this were to go down? And it's interesting to see that we're sitting at a point right now where we actually have to think about all of this, because you'd have never thought that we would have had to think about it. So it's interesting. Very interesting. And I assume, yes, well, Pence actually wouldn't they wouldn't have to put a nominee up because Pence would have the authority to appoint a new vice president as per the Constitution if he were to ascend to the presidency. Or he could choose not to, also. All right, last article before we go on to what I'm thankful for. Ocasio-Cortez on Biden accusation, you can't believe women until it inconveniences you. This is from Tim Pierce over at Daily Wire. Representative AOC called attempts to keep people from talking about a sexual assault allegation against former President Joe Biden a form of gaslighting. That's one of the 3 words that she knows. Ocasio-Cortez spoke during an online discussion hosted by The Wing, a networking group for women. On Tuesday, one questioner asked Ocasio-Cortez about the allegation against Biden, the presumptive Democratic nominee, saying that she really resents the fact that Biden is someone who has a really long history of being creepy to women, according to CBS News. What you're voicing is so legitimate and real, and that's why this kind of silencing of all dissent to be a form of gaslighting, the freshman congresswoman answered. I think it's legitimate to talk about these things, and if we again want to have the integrity, you can't say both believe in women, support all of this until it inconveniences you, until it inconveniences us. Tara Reid, a former staff assistant to Biden when he was U.S. Senator, said on a podcast last month that Biden sexually assaulted her in 1993. Nobody witnessed the alleged assault. Reid told her brother and a friend about it at the time. Ocasio-Cortez said Democrats should not be prioritizing beating President Trump over openly discussing Biden's history with women, which includes several accusations of inappropriate behavior. Doing so would be the exact opposite of integrity, she said. I think a lot of us are just in this moment where it's how did we get here? It almost felt like we started the cycle when we kind of moved on from, all of this. And now it feels like we're back in it. Ocasio-Cortez continued. And, the most diverse field that we've ever seen, that we're kind of back to replaying old movies in a way. Reid later responded gratefully to Ocasio-Cortez for the Congresswoman's comments, saying, I'm very humbled and honored because she's literally the only politician that has spoken on my behalf. Right, because it's inconvenient for everybody else right now. So that's going to be that. We're going to call it on that, and I'm going to have to thread this one together here. I'm going to catch up on my audio platforms tonight. I'm behind on that again. Thanks everybody who came back after the internet blink, so we'll make sure that we get that all taken care of here. It's amazing. We did 3 hours of video gaming last night with no blink, but this morning we had a blink, and when we were on Ed's World, we had the blink hell that we went through on that. So thanks everybody who came by and continued talking. I'll make sure that I get everybody's name written down. Even though I can't see it on this monitor, I can see it on this monitor here, so I know who's all talking. But we're going to finish out today with something I'm thankful for, and we're going to send everybody off to work for the day. So, thing that I'm thankful for today, I alluded to it in the beginning of the stream, is the fact that so many people under such a hardship at this point, because this is a hard time for everybody. It's not just the people who are furloughed and the first responders. Even people that are normally going to work and deemed essential at this point are seeing pay cuts because of volume cuts. People are losing 4 hours a week, 8 hours a week or so, losing days at work. Or some states where they're allowed to cut wages, they're losing wages as well. I know that Spook Girl over on Twitch that I like to watch had a little bit of a salary cut as well. So go over and support her. Look up Spook Girl over on Twitch. Throw a subscription her way, or at least just a view. Tell a friend about her because she needs a little bit of help. She lost a little bit of wages there. I lost a little bit of wages off of this, but still, everybody came out and opened up their wallets. They opened up and we got almost to $600 in a single 12-hour stream. And I haven't looked yet, but I think that there are still going to be some donations flowing in for this as well. So even in the face of looking at some economic difficulty, the people, the viewers of this channel, the viewers of the Freedom Scoop Media Group, and all of the other channels on it were generous enough to come out and open up their wallets and help out the people that are on the front lines that are trying to battle this. And that is what I'm thankful for. And we will be back here tomorrow with more contemporary because I'm sure that the news isn't going to stop, and we're going to see even more crazy stuff coming. I'm already seeing some crazy stuff brewing on Twitter right now. So until tomorrow, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.